Muscatine City Council in-depth session will now come to order. Greg, would you perform a roll call, please?
I will, if I retrieve my pen. Thank you. Councilmember Spread, Councilmember Phillips, Councilmember Bynum,
Present.
Councilmember Shahade,
Present.
Natfig,
Present.
Fitzgerald.
Here.
And Lorette. 4 present, Your Honor.
Thank you, Greg. Kind of a light showing here tonight. The in-depth session will include 3 items tonight. First of all, an IT presentation on new equipment here in council chambers by staff member John Krusenstein. Hi, John.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. Obviously, we put some new equipment in the council chambers here that I would highly encourage the use of. Obviously, when you came in a few weeks ago, I think probably the first thing that was noticed is the albatross in the middle of the room is gone. I'm sure that everybody noticed that when they came in. Of course, we've got our large digital display over here as well that I know everybody's been dying to see what it looks like when it's turned on. So with no further ado, I'll actually turn it on. When we went through this project, a couple of things.
Oh, there it is.
Well, that hasn't happened yet. Okay, moving right along. One of the comments that I received from some of the presenters was they had a difficult time seeing the screen. So we went back and forth a couple of different ways on exactly how to solve that problem. What we actually decided is just to mount a display on the side of the lectern here that will have the same display as what's on that screen as well. So our presenter will be able to see that as well. You can see we've made a few modifications to the lectern, mostly to hold the electronics that were required with that. I just put together an extremely simple, it took all of about 2 minutes to put together an extremely simple PowerPoint presentation that I'm not going to bore you in, but I'm just going to go through that. The first thing we've got here is a little presenter. And for some reason, my PowerPoint doesn't want to work very well. So let's, we can see we're off to a good start here this evening. Let's try one more time. Okay, and what I'm doing here is I have a little presenter in my hand, and what I can do is I could actually walk around this room at this particular point and switch from slide to slide. Another thing that this presenter does have is a little laser pointer as well that I could point out a few items with that laser pointer if I wanted to. So I can move forward through different slides. I could also move backwards just using this presenter here as well. That's if you just simply have a simple PowerPoint presentation. However, this machine can go a little farther than just a simple PowerPoint. I did want to point out we do have internet access to that and also access to some of the magic equipment that I think would be great resource for City Council to use at meetings. Say, for example, you were looking at or speaking of some particular property, you may want to actually view where that property is in relationship with other properties as well. And we can just simply zoom in and maybe go in and use the aerial photography that was part of the magic system. But for some reason also doesn't want to work this evening.
It's already outdated, man.
Operator error, right?
Zoom in on the sewer separation, clean sewer.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, obviously we'll have to double check on that. This system is of course, housed out at Power and Water. We do have a connection to it. So I can't actually answer the question why that we're not receiving any aerial photography this evening. But that's also another resource that is available, and I would encourage you to do that. I think typically on a Thursday night it's probably going to work. Why it chose tonight to not, I kind of scratching my head a little bit along with you as to why that's happened. So we'll,
It happened to me all the time.
we'll move on. One thing we wanted to allow would be guest access to the system as well. So I've got a laptop up on my screen, probably from Councilmember Bynum's perspective. He can probably see I do have this laptop, however, it's not actually connected to anything at this particular point. But that would serve the case of a guest access. And I also have a little access panel right here that I can push down on, and it will pop up. And that gives me a spot that I can plug in my laptop. It's got power available for that. Internet is available via wireless connection that's available here in the council chambers. And then we've also got, if I plug this in, and my laptop wants to put a signal out to it, you will see I will actually switch over and we'll see what's on that laptop by just simply plugging it in. If I unplug it, it should switch back to my non-graphical map.
Yeah.
So if I were to plug that back in again, of course, it would just go to that. So if there is something plugged into the top, it will display that. If not, so we'll go back to our system here. We wanted to maintain some physical security with this. The lectern is under lock and key here, so we do maintain some physical security with that as well. At this point, I would ask if there's any questions that council might have, other than why it's not working, because I'm not entirely sure myself. So hopefully I'll discuss that with Magic tomorrow. And
But you can
figure
get
it out.
on go to a browser and get on the Magic website. If you wanted to get it, you wouldn't have to pull it out of.
You wouldn't necessarily have to pull that out of. I think it would actually be a little faster going in this direction, but you could get on with what we call the beacon site. Yes, it would be available to do that as well.
Okay.
Oh, but yes, I can pop up any website I might like, including ours. So it is completely operational that way as well. So even if a research question came up, you do have access to internet here. I know that many of you also have access to your laptops that would have that ability as well. But this is a tool that's available for council use, and I would highly encourage its use.
Can you use USB connection rather than the video?
It is, we can make that option available. I know there's a couple of changes I still want to make with this. One of those options would be we don't have sound connected into the audio system with the room. I think that's probably a point we'll want to change. So there's probably a few different options that we'll continue to explore with this.
Okay. Good.
Any questions of the 4 council members present this evening? Oh, John? Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you.
Very much. We're now in the 21st century, correct? Here in council chambers?
That's right.
Good, good. Our next presenter, the city's finance director on the travel policy update, Nancy Leuck.
It's been quite a few years since we've gone through and updated the city's travel policy. And as it was pointed out, it wasn't, I don't think you were clear on the changes we made or we're proposing to make. A lot of them are language and clarification changes. Some of the probably more significant changes that are being proposed are the for individuals traveling out of state to locations where meals are more expensive than they are in Iowa. We are proposing that there's a GSA website, basically the IRS-approved rates for those individual cities. So if a person is going to Washington, D.C., you're likely going to pay more for meals than you would in Des Moines. And this would allow employees to exceed our current maximums for those specific locations.
But only with prior approval.
And, of course, with prior approval of the city administrator. And some of the other changes are just to clarify the, the approval process. Basically, travel within the area of Muscatine doesn't require a formal authorization, but travel overnight does, and that has to be approved by the department director or the city administrator. Individuals with auto allowances, they would not be eligible for mileage unless it exceeded a 150-mile radius. That's our current policy. We did make a provision in there that if it was somewhere longer and that it would be more advantageous for the city, we would allow allow for employees that get auto allowances to use a city vehicle rather than using their own vehicle and then claiming mileage for the miles in excess of 150. That's come up a few times over the years. It also, we added a provision in here on individuals that are traveling that are eligible for overtime. And we had this as a separate policy before, basically what Fair Labor Standards Act provides for that. So it's also in the travel policy. The previous policy did also for the mayor and council. It had that any costs for the mayor or city council had to be approved by the majority of council if it was over $50, and that was a long time ago. So we are proposing that go up to $250, which would cover a night or two, motel bills plus meals. And I think that covers most of the significant changes. We are also proposing that departments, it was already in there that one national conference per year would be allowed, and we're also limiting regional conferences to one per year unless prior approval is received by the city administrator. So a lot of them are not significant changes. I did forget one other one. The meal maximums would also be allowed to be exceeded for meals that were part of the organized program of a seminar or a conference. So if there was a special event, a banquet, if the meal there exceeded our maximums, that could also be approved, again, with the city administrator's approval.
The changes are basically just a compilation of issues that have been identified over the years, a few tweaks based on federal requirements, but just issues that have come up over the year that we're trying to address by further defining or clarifying the policy. That's really what it comes down to. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Obviously, you're not acting on it tonight. And I will have Fran include that version in the agenda packet so that you can better see
Yeah, you can't
exactly
tell
what the
on-
changes are. It's harder to tell on the web version.
The only comment I will make, Craig, here, if you can take a note of it, with the city vehicles, and the allowance, and who's taking vehicles home, and what the allowance is, if we can discuss this during the budget session coming up. I don't think we discussed that last budget.
So you would like to discuss auto allowance
Auto allowance and the city vehicles as well.
and city vehicles, take-home vehicles?
Yep. And how many vehicles, who utilize these vehicles when take home. So if we can just have something during the budget session here, we can evaluate the best course.
We absolutely can see that. Just as a side note, depending on the process, these take-home vehicles are not. Well, I guess it depends on the department, for example, whether or not they're taxable and those types of issues.
Yeah, and I think when I read through the presentation here that Nancy gave here, I think if you travel within the city vehicle within 50 miles, and there's a different set of allowance compared if you go over 150 miles.
The people using their personal automobiles
Compared to city vehicle. Yeah.
compared to city vehicles, there wouldn't be an official authorization
That's
for
what I
for
meant,
the,
yeah.
if there's a meeting in the Quad Cities or something like that, or Cedar Rapids, Iowa City.
Yeah.
The people with auto allowances, though, that covers their in-town travel and travel within 150 miles in most cases.
But yes, we will include that for
Yeah,
discussion
because
at budget.
it came up late in the budget process, and
We didn't
I
discuss.
think we had,
take
we just, I think Nancy provided a list, but I don't think we had any discussion on it.
Discussion, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
We'll probably plan on putting this on next week's agenda if everybody's okay with it for official consideration.
Nancy, pretty safe to say, any city employee that plans travel should not assume anything. Should always perhaps engage Greg in conversation about that travel and the expenses.
Generally, the department director can approve the relatively regional travel, the Quad Cities, that type of thing. Any out-of-state travel would require Greg's approval.
But it still wouldn't hurt to engage him in conversation, never assume anything, is what I'm saying.
That's always safe, yes.
Okay. Any more questions, council? Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation is regarding a review of infill opportunities through tax abatement. That would be Steve Boka and Greg Monson. Gentlemen?
Wait, Steve, want to start so I can take a couple notes here?
Last July, we presented council with a kind of an overview of a lot of annexation opportunities. I think if my memory serves me right, there was about 4,400 of options that you could evaluate for consideration in the future. And as part of that discussion, we also talked about opportunities for infill development and/or tax abatement for various areas of town that maybe there was some local interest in providing some economic incentive to people to utilize. And we've already presented with the annexation options to council. We have put together kind of an outline of what we see as potential consideration for city council to move forward with infill options. And I'd like to just walk through those quickly. And if there is a consensus on council that they like one or more of these, then we will formulate an official program for your review and consideration. But before we go to that extent, we wanted to kind of walk through how we visualize this might occur and then receive your input. So there really are two different proposals, and the first one would be dealing with historic districts. And as you all know, we have several buildings in town that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as two nationally recognized historic districts, that being the West Hill and the downtown districts. And there's ongoing discussion about increasing the amount of those districts in the future. This program would allow council to be flexible enough to add those in a future date if they become available and you want to do that. But we'd essentially offer this as a tax abatement program as opposed to a tax rebate. A TIF is a rebate where you actually pay your taxes and the city rebates a portion of your taxes to you. Under this scenario, you would get a tax abatement. In other words, your you'd make the improvements to your property, they would go up a prescribed amount, and then the city would forgive a portion of those taxes due and payable as an incentive or recognition of the person or persons that have made those improvements to their real estate. So if you're with me so far, then we would propose that we look at any property owner improving property assessed value by at least 10% if it's a historic building. That doesn't seem like a lot, but we have to remember that a lot of the work that goes into historic structures is tedious work that doesn't necessarily increase the value of the property. You know, if you start maintaining windows and replacing them the same way they were, or, you know, stripping paint and restoring wood and doing all those things that come with historic preservation, restoration, those don't necessarily increase your value, so there's no real payback under this program for that. So we reduced the amount that you'd have to bring that up. We thought 10% is a beginning point to discussion. And then we might look at a higher payback on a rebate, because you might have $100,000 in renovation on the building, but it might only increase your assessed value by $10,000. So we're saying maybe in those cases we want to look at a more accelerated rebate. Not a rebate, but an abatement process for them. And you'll see there's three scenarios here. You might have 3 years at 100%. Now keep in mind that's just for that increase in assessed value, not for the entire assessed value, okay? 5 years at 100%, or you can use, and some of you are familiar with the 10-year declining scale where we start at 90 and go to 80 and go to 70, and eventually when you're at the end, you're on full taxes again. Well, that kind of provides some a recognition to folks that are willing to invest in these historic properties in town, but it doesn't address the entire neighborhood as a whole. And we have a number of houses within these districts and buildings within these districts that aren't what we call contributing buildings to that area. In other words, they're not specifically listed as having any historic value per se. In that case, we're saying, look, if we're going to stabilize these neighborhoods and make this a viable neighborhood, we ought to offer something to the rest of the property owners in that area in recognition of their investment in the neighborhood that helps stabilize those property values, et cetera. So we're looking at maybe a 15% increase in that case, and that's easier to do because a lot of those improvements would be taxable. So you could do that, and again, look at some kind of a declining scale or some kind of a schedule, and there are a couple here on your paperwork that you see in front of you. We outlined sort of program advantages, and I'll just touch on those. We think that these two programs, as it relates to this project, promote neighborhood stabilization, address the blighting influences, recognize reinvestment in these areas, increase property values, preserve and expand the tax base, promote infill opportunities, and we have the ability to table the abatement schedule to meet city council's goals, whatever those might be. So that's the program with respect to our, what I'll call the historic districts or our neighborhoods. Any questions so far on that portion of it, or Greg?
Just to be clear, we're looking to distinguish between historic homes and those not of historic nature, but still within the historic district. Those homes that are not of a historic nature would get a lesser benefit than somebody that's putting the time, effort, and dollars into a home and maintaining the historic character of the neighborhood. But it's still of value to bring up a home within that district. It brings up the entire value of the district by making those
it would
improvements.
address all of the residential structures
So
potentially within that district as opposed to just those that are historic.
So for example, a homeowner that, with a historic home that puts value back into that home may get a 5-year 100% abatement, while the same person next door who does not have a home of historic nature or character would receive perhaps a 3-year 100% benefit. So a lesser benefit, an incentive for folks to keep up that historic nature or character of the neighborhood.
And again, I think the idea is here to recognize that reinvestment in some of these neighborhoods where maybe we have seen some declining residential structures. This is an incentive to encourage people to try to keep those up if we can offer some kind of assistance to them. So,
Steve, that you're mentioning historic districts, not all of Muscatine is considered historic. Are you talking about doing outside of historic districts at this time?
I am, that's a good question, and we're going to try to address that in this very next section that we'll talk about now. If there are no more questions on the historic areas, and again, keep in mind, if the Historic Preservation Commission comes back and recommends additional areas, the council could add that into this mix if they wanted to, so those homes in that area would also be eligible.
Steve?
Yes.
The taxes that we would be abating are only the portion of the tax bill attributed to the city? Or does this tax bill affect the city, or the county and the school as well, like the TIF does?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't want to misstate that, Phil, but my understanding is that it impacts that assessed value increase for that piece of property, and I would guess that would be across the board.
That's my understanding. It's my understanding that the county does not have the ability to do just a city abatement. It would have to be a
Okay.
county, it would have city-county school abatement.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out.
But again, only the portion of increase, not going back to the
Correct.
whole value, okay?
So basically like what the TIF does.
Yes, essentially, that
Creates a-
increment, if you will.
Creates a baseline, and you get an abatement or a TIF on
Yes.
anything additional, up to a point.
Phase 2 of this program is again another new idea. We've had abatement programs in the past, but this one truly tries to deal with infill development, where we have subdivisions within the city, as one example, that maybe construction has hesitated, but the streets are in place, the utilities are in place, the lots aren't moving, houses aren't being built. This is a way to maybe stimulate that development through some kind of an abatement to encourage people to go and invest and build these houses, or contractors to build the houses, or whomever. And it does essentially the same thing we talked about in the other areas. You, the city council, would select those areas. We would all obviously be in a position to make some recommendations to you, but you could choose which ones you wanted to extend these to. But we can probably all think of a couple subdivisions in town that have a lot of vacant lots that we'd like to see fill in. And the thought is, it's a lot cheaper to deliver services to folks that are living on streets and that already have existing water service and sewer service and public hard streets, et cetera, than it is to go out and bare ground and develop those programs later. So that would be for new construction, but it also then addresses those lots, and we've had this discussion before, that we all kind of think of as truly infill, where we've got maybe buildable lots within the city that are lots of record. It may not meet the statutory requirements for a new building lot, but they are what we call lots of record, meaning they were there prior to the adoption of the ordinance. So you can build on them as long as you're able to meet the current setbacks under the zoning ordinance and the other conditions. But they're not being built on because people just aren't building on them. So we're thinking, if this is there a program we can develop to encourage that kind of infill, where we've got these vacant lots where we have weeds or junk collecting that maybe all of a sudden could be an asset to the community and the neighborhood by placing a small home on it for someone and recognizing that investment in that neighborhood. Again, with a thought towards stabilization, maintaining property taxes, expanding the tax base, all the other issues that you see there, addressing blighting influences, new investment in the neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you got kind of a two-pronged thing, going back to your earlier comment, Bob, about, well, outside of the historic areas, you still have a program that deals with infill and deals with subdivisions. So if you have, in all neighborhoods, lots that are sitting empty that are suitable for development, there would be a program available to address that.
Thank you.
Questions on that?
The lot of record,
Yes.
existing lot of record. So what's the minimum side allowances or setback on 25 feet on the front? Is it 6 on the side lots?
They all depend on the zoning classification, Phil, but let's use a standard R3, 60-foot normal lot, building lot. You'd have 6 foot on either side, a 25-foot front and rear.
Okay.
In existing neighborhoods, there are exceptions to that front yard setback. If you have a building within 100 feet on one side and one side only, you can line up with that house. So if that house is out to within 15 feet of the front property line, you can line up.
Okay,
If you don't have anything on the other side, then it's 25 feet. If you have houses all along that street, But the distance between the closest one to the street and the farthest one from the street are within 10 feet of each other, then you average all of those, and that's how far you come out. That makes sense?
Yep.
And the other one is if you only have two and they're one on either side, you take the average distance between the two, and that's how far you can come out.
Okay.
So there's that adjustment, but you still have to have your prescribed side and rear yards. And again, if you get into a lot of these traditional older neighborhoods in town, you have, a lot of them have alley access for garages. So they may not need the width that you'd have in a typical setting where some of the houses have attached garages and that kind of thing now.
If you have a vacant lot that's a 33 foot, because some of them 33, 35, somewhere in that vicinity, and the side setback, side allowance in that area is less than 6, can you get a variance that would allow you to put something in that, as long as all the other houses have a 4 foot, you could go 4 foot?
Not without a code change currently, you can't. The minimum side yard in residential developments is 6 feet.
No matter what?
That's the minimum. There's some that have larger, and those are like an R1 where you might have a septic system and a well, and you have to get around that house to go back to service that septic system. Then you need a larger side yard. They go up to 15 feet so that you can get equipment to the backyard.
Right.
That's the logic behind that. But they drop down to 6 feet. You can, and are aware that we are moving toward an update of our comprehensive plan that we hope to have done in January. And out of that, we'll begin the process to update our zoning ordinance. If there is some thought on council that they want to look at something with a smaller or shorter distance as far as the side yard, we can look at that. The problem you run into is typically you need 10 feet between houses for fire protection. And so if you got a minimum of 5, you got that. We use 6. So if you had to, you could still get between the houses in most cases, and it gives you some kind of a fire separation, which is typically 10 feet. So that's kind of the rationale behind that.
I just think of all the older neighborhoods in the community that you might have 2 foot to the lot line on one side, and there's only 6 foot between the houses. There's some on 8th Street that, I mean, the gutters are touching each house. I mean,
And there are ways to overcome that. You could at the same time address fire codes, and require a more stringent fire code for homes that are built in that fashion. Maybe, I don't know what the standard is now, so, maybe the standard is a 1-hour firewall, maybe it's a 2-hour firewall.
Or no windows,
Or
those kinds of things, so you don't have
those types of
exterior
things.
openings.
So if you're interested in going that direction, there'd be some higher standards on the other side with fire code.
but as soon as you start changing the code requirements to increase fire protection, then you're potentially increasing the cost of the home.
Absolutely.
In Des Moines, and I kept the paper for quite a number of years. I don't know whether I still have it or not, but Des Moines 15, 20 years ago had an abatement process for true infill into neighborhoods that had 33, 35-foot lots, and it was fairly successful. And I hate to see us not, put up the red flag and say, well, we can't do this. It's got to be a 50-foot frontage or a 60-foot frontage, because you won't get it in those lots.
If you look at a standard 24 by 40-foot house, which is what you see on Lake Park Boulevard, if you go out Lake Park
Right.
Boulevard to your south, those are 24 by 40-foot homes facing, kind of pointing north, if you will, on the narrow side. That's a 24-foot house. By the time you add 12 feet onto that, 6 feet on either side, you're looking at what, a 36-foot lot. You can do that on that size lot. If you start to get a lot smaller than that and you reduce the side yards, then not only are you dealing with a fire control issue or a fire concern, I'm not saying couldn't be dealt with, but it's something you have to be aware of. You have to begin to think about density and just how dense a development you want to have in some of these neighborhoods. That's not always good either, where they're so close together that,
Okay.
There's not that air movement and some of the other things. So those are obviously some things you want to think about.
Okay. Well, I like the idea of this. This is something that whether we do annexation or not, this is something that we should be doing anyway in order to increase the housing stock and sit within the existing city of Muscatine.
I like the concept, both concepts, too.
Okay,
One question on the schedules. We'd end up, though, with the relatively small number of schedule options. I mean, depending on which category, we wouldn't end up with
A wide range of them? I don't think so.
No, I think we'd want to have basically 3 schedule options, one for historic, one for homes in historic districts, and then one for new construction.
okay,
And those would be set and that'd be uniformly applied.
right.
You can't say tonight which one you would recommend?
My initial recommendation would be for historic preservation that you use a more intense, more direct benefit to encourage people to reinvest in that, because as I said, you have to put a lot of money in that doesn't necessarily increase your value. If you get to that, I think it warrants maybe 100% for a period of years to encourage people to do that kind of work, that intense work. Now, keep in mind, you might be looking at a de-escalating on new construction. You might want to look at a declining abatement schedule, because remember, you're looking at a vacant lot, now you're looking at a new home, so you're looking at what? The whole tax value, okay? So you might want to look at 90, 80, 70, or something along those lines. That's something to kind of think about. We'll come back with some recommendation, try to run some numbers for you, but we didn't want to get too far into this unless there was a consensus that you thought you were interested to move forward with it.
Next step would be for staff to work, continue to work with the Historic Commission, but staff to come up with updated, or not an updated, but a new ordinance, run that by city attorney as well, make sure we've already talked with bond counsel briefly as well, just to have a general conversation, but we want to run that by him as well. Bring that back for city council review and comment, and then bring it back for 3 readings.
You know, you've got some favorable interest rates right now for home loans and those kinds of things. If we can offer this additional incentive, it might be just enough to get some people to stimulate that market again locally, and that'd be good for everybody.
So would there be any information, I don't want staff member on the phone for 10 hours doing it, but is there some access point by state we could find out what other communities are doing?
Oh, sure. There are a wide range of these all across the state. And as a matter of fact, our bond councils work with other communities that have done similar things. So there's a whole host of things. The state law is fairly broad in that respect. You have to follow certain guidelines, and we're okay with that. Past that point, you have some local decisions you make on your own, like what the scale is coming back as far as a payback and those kinds of things.
The vast majority are for new construction. We did come across one that was for green building, green standards, providing a greater incentive for green standards. I don't believe we've currently found any for historic districts. I don't recall any to date.
It's specifically mentioned that it's eligible for it, but I'm not sure that there are a lot of people doing it.
Specific program.
And I don't know why, but my suspicion is, again, going back to it takes a lot of work to raise the assessed value of those properties to get to that threshold. So if we reduce it to 10% and give a more direct payback in a shorter period of time, it may be enough to have that work for us.
But knowing how the assessment process works, a house that is in disrepair, you can have your assessed valuation lowered based on what the condition of the property is. And then as the property is improved, then the valuation can come up, and they may get their 10% just off of
Sure, and then you have those other ones,
improvements.
the foreclosures that there are several of around town, or the ones that are going through some state of neglect. It's not going to take a lot to go in and renovate those houses to bring that assessment up to that threshold so that you can benefit from that. And hopefully we get to that point where we have that interest in them before they go so far that they're candidates for demolition or other action.
Okay. Great.
Other comments from anybody or questions? Is everybody okay to move forward?
Most definitely.
Yeah, I'll entertain questions from the audience.
Howard, 802 Iowa Avenue. Steve, I just would ask that maybe you repeat and clarify any effect or non-effect issue regarding county and school district assessment limits.
I think my exact statement is, I didn't want to misstate that. I'm not sure what that impact is. I think that increment would be across the board, affecting schools and counties. It would also be inclusive of them. I don't know that, Bob, and I don't want to mistake.
If it were, let's say for discussion's sake, then does that have to go before those 2 boards for approval as well?
I do not believe it does under state law.
And I believe Jim had a conversation with county assessor and subsequently with myself, and I'm sure Steve as well, but that's where we took that information from. We believe that it affects all three. We don't believe the county currently has the ability to separate out just the city tax portion and abate only that portion.
But again, keep in mind, that's just the
It's
increment we're
incremental.
talking about, or that difference, okay?
And it would be down the road, just like TIF, down the road, all three entities.
All taxing
will-
authorities would benefit.
Will benefit from the incentive, so otherwise you may not have had any increase, period.
That's correct.
In all fairness to anyone else in council chambers, a question for Steve or the council? Okay, very good, Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, council, now time for comments this evening. We'll begin with Phil.
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, Scott.
I have nothing, thank you.
Osama.
I have nothing tonight. Thank you, Your Honor.
And Councilman Bynum.
Mr. Mayor, I certainly don't have any comments tonight. Thank you.
Okay, and Greg.
Just a reminder, 10 o'clock tomorrow, fire station, we will be having the 10th anniversary of firefighter passing.
Cruz.
that will be-
Mike Cruz, yes.
Mike Cruz. That'll be at 10 a.m. tomorrow at the fire station.
Very good, and I have no comments other than to, I guess, say one more time, I don't know where Vice President Xi is.
So moved.
Inundated by media lately asking me if I know where he's at. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Council's adjourned.
I think you need a trip to China to find him.